Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 189.
Wow, Daisy, I just have to comment on that. We are almost at 200 episodes. Can you believe it?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Whoever would have thought?
We'll have to have some kind of celebratory 200th episode. We did something at 100. I can't remember what, but we'll have to do something at 200. Yes, I mean, that will be heading towards 4 years as well, because of course, obviously 52 weeks in a year. So yeah, how time flies.
I never would have thought it when we first started.
I know. Crazy. Almost 4 years. And, well, you might have noticed that Terri is sounding rather gravelly, very sexy, got that sexy, not feeling very well voice going on. It's funny, isn't it? That's the only little plus point when you get a cold. You end up with that throaty, sexy voice.
It got so bad the other day, though, that I tried to make a couple of phone calls to set up appointments and things, and people had a hard time understanding me because it was just like this rumbly. So I am about, I would say 75 to 80% around the corner now. So definitely feeling better. The lovely thing is that Daisy does a ton of editing with what I say. And so fortunately, if I go into a coughing attack or need to blow my nose during this, you all won't have to hear it.
So apart from your different sounding voice, what have you got for us today, Terri?
Well, Daisy, I actually started listening to a new podcast.
Wow. Da, da, da.
This is always fun when I find a new one, but then the drawback is I want to listen to a whole bunch of their episodes because all of the topics sound interesting to me. But this one is called Good Life Project, and the host is Jonathan Fields. And I chose one that he did a solo episode rather than with a guest. It's about a topic that we've talked about in various ways before, but he has his own little approach to help people. So I thought it would be worth thinking about. The title of the episode is called How to Take Action in Spite of Self-Doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we've talked before about like imposter syndrome and things. So I thought it would be helpful, like I said, just to think of another way to approach this. When he started talking about this concept, he talked about an example from his own life. And I think it was a business he was starting, or maybe it was even starting the podcast. I don't remember exactly, but he talked about the fact that he, of course, had some self-doubt. What if people don't want what I'm delivering? What if the business doesn't succeed? What if I don't know enough or whatever those kind of concerns are? And so he had to start looking at how do I really dig in and move forward despite the fact that I'm having those insecurities and self-doubts. How do I still make this happen? And he has been able to be successful. He's written a number of books. He came up with, of course, you and I always talk about this in these episodes where people say there are 5 things you should do, and then we only really catch 3 of them, or there are 7 steps. He said there are 3 main categories that he thinks about, or 3 main concepts, and he called them the ABCs. And he started with the C, and the C represents conviction. We're having to kind of check in with yourself and think about, why is it that this is important to me? I need to be invested in doing this. So you need to be connected to why it's important, why you said yes originally. So many people this time of year have taken on some kind of a challenge or something that they're going to do this year or going to work on. And so looking back, why did I say yes to this challenge? It's got to be something important to me. Otherwise, I mean, unless I felt pressured from someone, I wouldn't have said yes. So digging in, and he talks about how he himself asks why. He calls it the 5 whys to ask yourself. But from that title, you might think there are 5 different types of why questions to ask, but really it's asking yourself why 5 times. So let's say you wanted to start a YouTube channel with your content. The first question is, why is this important to me? And his first answer might be, I want a stream of income that I can be responsible for myself. That's perfectly legitimate. And then he says, why does that matter so much to me? So you ask why again, and you go deeper. And then he might say something like, I want to be able to increase or decrease the amount of work I'm doing toward this at my own pace. Ask a why question again. Why is that important to me?
Interesting. Yeah.
I have 2 young kids and I like to be very active, and I find that in my day-to-day job, I don't have much time for my family and my activities. Okay. Why is that important? And so you just keep drilling in to really identify why this is of value to you. And again, it's not as though the first why answer he gave wasn't valid, but it would be pretty easy for him to kind of stop pursuing it as soon as it got difficult. As soon as you came up and learned all of the things you have to do to start your YouTube channel, and how are you going to get sponsors, and how are you going to, get paid from this, it would be really easy to stop. But when you've drilled down several levels, why really drives your commitment. So even though you have these self-doubts, it's so important to you. You said yes for such an important set of reasons that you are willing to face the challenges.
So is it asking why 5 times, or are there some other whys to add to that list? It is just a sort of...
For him, it was just asking it.
Yeah, the number of times you're basically asking the same question.
He gave an example, and in his example, he only went 3 whys in, and it was so deep for him at that point that he didn't need to keep going.
Yeah. So 5 is probably the most you need.
And so he says, all of the levels of why gave him the level of conviction that was necessary to keep doing something, even though it was challenging. It really anchored him to his deeper conviction. And I think many of us, especially if we're facing something that is challenging, and, I'm always a little biased when I share examples with you, because my work with the fasting method around people who are working on reversing type 2 diabetes or working on losing a significant amount of weight, it's not easy. It requires a lot of conviction.
For sure.
Because you're going to run into difficult decisions. You're going to run into difficult internal responses. And those are the times when it is easy to just throw away the goal, abandon the plan. And instead, if you keep digging into this, you really strengthen your level of conviction.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really good tip to take away for other things. It's just that asking the same question, asking yourself why over and over and over till you get to the point where, yeah, okay, I'm really sure about that now. And also, I suppose it opens up. Asking yourself those questions can end up steering you in a slightly different direction. Because you might have, if you stop at that top level, it's just about earning some money. Or it's just about losing some weight. It's just about this, it's just about that. We've talked about this before, haven't we, about finding your why. It's got to be detailed, it's got to be important. It's not just about losing weight, it's about losing weight so I can be doing something, usually making more of a social connection, playing football with my grandchildren, whatever it is. The more you can picture it, the more motivating it is, and the stronger your conviction. I like that. But you've got to go down those levels of why. Yeah, if you stop at the first one, it's too vague. It's too easy to, start next week.
Exactly, Daisy. And I feel like I could say this 20 times and I can't quite capture it. But it's that idea that so often we have a great goal in mind. And we think we know why we want to do it. but it is still right up there at that first level. And that level of conviction is so easy to abandon.
Mm.
You and I both abandoned lots of things we wanted to do. And I think partly because it's easy to abandon goals or ideas when you run into those, challenges. But when you dig down to that next level and that next level, it's like you have footing. You have a foundation that's into the ground. And now when the big wind comes, it's okay
Mm.
because you are firmly planted in why you're doing this. And it doesn't matter that the storm is brewing around you. You're going to keep moving forward. So I think the C really is an important part of this kind of strategy or this way of thinking about it that he gives. B is bravery.
Makes sense.
And he says, oftentimes when we take on a new goal, a new task, something that's big, oftentimes we really don't know how it's going to turn out. So even imagine, you and I have used the example of weight loss. If I'm currently 150 pounds overweight, I might not have any idea what it would be like to get to that goal. If I want to start that YouTube channel, I've never had a YouTube channel before. I have no idea. What are the problems that I might run into? What if my YouTube channel is so popular, I have to go on all these famous podcasts to talk about how great it is? Oh my gosh, what will that be like? So we don't know. There's so much kind of uncertainty involved in the path of this goal that we really have to work on our bravery in facing the uncertainty. The other piece he talked about related to this is that for many of us, the stakes are pretty high. If I don't lose this 150 pounds, I'm going to continue to struggle with this, or my doctor is going to give me a hard time, or my health is going to deteriorate, or I'm not going to be able to run around with my grandkids. If I don't start this YouTube channel, I won't get known and I won't get to have that ability to manage my work time differently. The stakes feel pretty high and connected to a lot of uncertainty. So this is why bravery is so necessary here. He said also that these high stakes and uncertainties often lead us to a state of dread.
Yeah.
We dread failure. We dread not experiencing what we want to experience. So again, hard to move forward when we're in a state of dread. So he talked about chunking the high stakes and the uncertainty, chunk them into tinier steps to get there. So rather than thinking about, my gosh, what am I going to do when my YouTube channel has 2 million followers and no. How are you going to get there? Let me first just learn how to record and upload my content. Let me learn how to put cool graphics on my videos so that my content is more accessible to listeners. Let me learn about the marketing. When should I release my new videos? So breaking down the things that you feel uncertain about or that feel really high stakes, chunk them into tinier steps. By breaking it into smaller steps, you really decrease the level of uncertainty. I don't need to know what I'm going to do 6 months from now when this happens. I only need to know what I'm going to do right now to work on building my content. So it really can help decrease that feeling of dread and uncertainty. And he talks about really seeing uncertainty instead of something to be avoided, that really you can turn this into moments of feeling possibility. There is fear and uncertainty that can lead to opportunities for great success if you don't let them hold you back and become barriers. They actually can move you forward, because when you're uncertain, when the stakes are high, You need to learn a little more. You need to experiment a little more.
Mm.
Great opportunities for success rather than stopping in that state of dread.
Yeah, I like that. It's a bit of a quagmire, isn't it? That feeling of dread. It's easy to get lost in. So I like that, giving you some footholds.
Mm-hmm. Another thing he talked about under this category of developing the bravery or using bravery is he did some research of folks who took a lot of risks to create something. Artists, musicians, people who, they're really kind of putting themselves out on a limb, creating something with the risk of it may flop. People may not listen. People may not like the art. People may not join or whatever. And what he found, those who really succeeded the best, that they would create these systems where you know what is going to happen, or what he calls certainty anchors, so that they would feel psychologically grounded. So, for example, they might wear the same clothes each day when they do this activity. Because I don't know what's going to happen when I do this, but I know this anchor. I know what I wear. They might eat the same thing, doing something that is really known, routine, scheduled. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know I'm going to practice it every day at noon. So while you're floating in this sea of uncertainty, you put some certainty anchors in there, things that don't at all feel uncertain to you. And that this can help, he calls it kind of giving you a tether to what is already known, rather than continuing to look at the unknown.
And takes next to no effort to implement.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not adding to your list of challenges, really.
That's right. And then the other thing that he added to this, and I thought this was a really interesting conversation about bravery, is he used this phrase, normalizing unconfident action. So many of us naturally struggle with taking action that we don't feel confident in. I keep going back to the analogy of learning to ski. I'm not super confident in it. And so about a week ago, I went skiing and I was nervous. I haven't been since last April. I thought, what if I fall down as soon as I try to get off the ski lift? What if I don't remember how to turn? Oh, this could just be a disaster. So normalizing taking that unconfident action that you don't already have confidence in doing. And one of the things he said about that really helps us normalize it is to surround ourselves with others who are also, what he says, saying yes to the unknown. So I don't go out onto the really skilled hills. I go to the ones where other beginners are skiing. I surround myself with other people who might fall off when they get off the ski lift, because it helps me see that taking the risk is okay. It normalizes being in that unconfident state until you become confident. Eventually, I won't need to be on that hill. But while I'm not confident about it, it helps to surround yourself. And if you think about it, oftentimes we create or join communities of people who are working on that same goal. How did you and I meet? Through a community around, how do I implement this ketogenic lifestyle? And some people, I don't know how you ever felt about this. Obviously, I know how I felt about it, but, a lot of people get in there and question, is this really something I can do? Is this something I can do on the holidays? Is this something I can do on my birthday? Is this something I can do long-term, or am I only going to do it for 3 weeks? So we join that community because everyone in there is taking those unconfident steps.
Yeah, there's something comforting about all learning together, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's one of the things that brings problems. That's a good example, actually, those kind of groups where you run into issues. The issues, one of the biggest issues that tends to arise is that mismatch between people who are new and people who've been doing it for a while, and people who've been doing something for a long while. Because you get that sort of, or a lot of people get that fatigue with those newbie questions all the time. But of course, you find those kind of things exciting when you're in that same group. There's a reason, isn't it, why things are graded? Why, when you sign up to a class, if you haven't done it before, you go to the beginner's class. You don't go to the intermediate or the advanced because, you know, you're going to be out of your depth, but you're also going to irritate the hell out of people who've been doing it for a while. It's a tricky thing to have a mix. But it's kind of also necessary to have a bit of a mix in some ways, because you want to see where you're going and you want to be able to offer some help to the people who are coming up behind. But it's a tricky balance. But yeah, the place to be really is where everyone's striving towards the same thing.
And again, it helps to normalize. I'm not the only one feeling nervous. I'm not the only one who has uncertainty about this. But as you mentioned, having someone who's a little ahead, who's already experienced it, who already has this skill. I took a lesson last year. So there was a really great skier teaching, 5 or 6 of us who were newbies at skiing. So we could see, wow, there's so much potential we can develop. But we could look at each other and say, oh, I feel you. I know this is hard. So we do need some of that modeling from people who have been there and who can answer our questions or help us develop the skills. You know, if I were starting a YouTube channel, I would reach out to people who have a successful YouTube channel. I would watch all their YouTubes and find out, oh, that worked really well for them. That one wasn't so great. How did they recover from that? And try to learn from them. But I might join up with a few other people that I know who are beginning YouTube developers, because we would be going through that exploration together, taking those unconfident steps. So the last one, the A of the ABCs, is awareness and ease. And he first talked about, in his own experience, journaling is a great way to gain awareness. And he kind of encouraged folks to think about journaling. What am I actually feeling? What is actually happening? What stories am I telling myself? Because many of us have, as you and I have discussed in many different episodes, many of us have limiting beliefs. We have beliefs about our abilities, about what's possible, what we can and can't do, what our strengths are. And we often have those in a limited way. We've kind of boxed ourselves in over time. And so by asking these questions, well, what's actually happening? Well, I put up my first video and I've only gotten 3 views. Okay. What stories am I telling myself about that? Well, I'm telling myself I'm never going to be a successful YouTuber. Okay. Well, what if Lewis Howes only had 3 listeners the first time he did one? What can you do? Where do you go from here? So creating that awareness with journaling. He also talked about mindfulness. So really kind of increasing your awareness of what is happening outside of you as well as inside of you. And he talked about mindfulness as a mechanism that really teaches you how to train your awareness and what you're paying attention to. Because oftentimes we're paying attention to a lot of noise out there.
Yeah, really distracting.
And it would be really important to really be able to pay attention to what is the scenario right in front of me? What is really happening? What am I feeling? Again, kind of going back to even what he said about the journaling. It allows you to then choose what stimuli to kind of drop and not pay attention to. Like, I'm not going to listen to that noise. I'm going to focus over here. So mindfulness practices can really help you learn where to have your awareness and where to let go of things so that they don't clog up your awareness.
I think that was that felt kind of key, what you just said there. Mindfulness is about learning the awareness, learning to take notice of what's really happening. And I feel like, because when you listen to some mindfulness meditations and things, it's all about that awareness of your immediate surroundings, isn't it? What does it feel like to breathe in and out? What are you hearing? What's going on? What can you feel? What does it feel like to have your feet on the ground? All of these things. But yes, being mindful of what is really happening. What is really happening? Not what you think might be happening, not what you think other people might be thinking is happening, what you're thinking about what other people are thinking about what might be happening. You get my point. It's like a grounding. What's really happening? What are the important elements of what's really happening? And let's forget about everything else.
And by doing that, this kind of goes back to the bravery piece. I think we can help avoid the dread feeling of the uncertainty and the high stakes, because those are the things that we're projecting into the future. It's not what's right here, and it's not what's really happening. It's not what's really going on inside of us. It's projecting. It's allowing future anticipation, dread of the uncertainty and the high stakes to shut us down. Like you said, if I fear people aren't going to like my video and people are going to think I'm not good at my content, well, I'm not putting out any more content then. But if I can focus on 3 people watched and gave positive feedback, I felt good delivering that message. It felt aligned for me to be working in this content. That's what's important. So awareness, the A of the ABCs, is really important. And for him, his practice includes breathing, using breath work. And so he talked about the box breathing, where, it's, let's say, for example, you breathe in for the count of 3, then you pause for the count of 3, then you exhale for the count of 3, and pause for the count of 3. So just using this flow in breathing. And you and I, again, have talked about this in various episodes, but using breath work will either regulate or down-regulate your nervous system. And so talking about the parasympathetic nervous system and calming it down. If I'm breathing quickly, rapidly, I'm going to rev up my system. I'm going to go into fight or flight or freeze mode. That's not going to help me accomplish my goals. But if I can regulate my breathing, slow it down, do this in a way that calms my system, now I have so much more potential to be open, to take the necessary steps, and take that unconfident action, because my body is in a calm state. It's easier to act when we're in that calm state. So again, I think rather than focusing on this from, the imposter syndrome and adjusting or resolving that, I think he gives some really kind of practical things to focus on: awareness and ease, bravery and conviction, and really developing those to take action, to move forward, even when we have self-doubt.
Yeah, I really like that. In particular, I really liked where you started with the conviction and where you ended up talking about with the journaling. And I was thinking about, I put an arrow going back to, with journaling, going back to those whys and the exploration you did at the beginning with really drilling down on that conviction. And the note I wrote to start with when you started talking about conviction was remembering when times are getting hard, tapping back into what excited you about this project, this new endeavor you're doing to start with, because that's what it feels like when you first start thinking about something, you first start planning it. There's the excitement, isn't there? But it's when you get into the bit where you need more of the bravery, or you need bravery often to get started, but where you need that, I suppose, more Brene Brown's grit, when the necessity for grit comes in, where you go through that boring hump. Often it's boring or it's grueling, it's difficult, but it's stuff you've got to get through to get where you're going. I think that would be where it would be really handy to look back on that and look back on those notes, look back on your journaling to find out, yeah, what excited me and what are those levels of whys I went down to get to that bedrock of conviction. Because even if you've done that exercise to start with, it can be a bit easy to forget when it's all a little bit too challenging.
Yeah, you hit a barrier or a roadblock, go back, remind yourself, like you said, what excited me? I said yes initially to this. Why is that? How can I kind of reignite my conviction and, kind of call into action that bravery, taking that unconfident step because this is so important to me. I want to move it forward. I want to advance this.
Because it's hard, like you were saying. And most of the people who are listening will be in the community that we're a part of and are working on things to do with their diet and lifestyle and health and well-being. And there are so many challenges that come up with that. And I think we do see quite a clear difference, actually, in groups of people who have really drilled down into that conviction and really thought about it when it comes to longevity. When it comes to these people who have decided, yeah, I am somebody, and you talk about this all the time, don't you? Becoming part of your identity. I am somebody who fasts regularly. I am somebody who doesn't eat between meals. I am somebody who eats low carb. I'm somebody who's keto. I'm somebody who's vegan. I'm somebody, whatever it is, that's just part of who I am. But it was hard work to get there, can pretty well guarantee. There were a lot of challenges to make that your norm. And I think we can think of plenty of examples of people who haven't managed to do that. They haven't gone down the number of levels of whys that they needed to, who flip-flop on and off the wagon. And particularly this time of year, New Year's resolutions, you see full force going from what was popping up on feeds a month ago to what's popping up now. And what chances are is going to be what's popping up again in a month or two's time. You need to step back, ask yourself those 5 whys and provide that strong foundation. Because like you say, if you haven't got that strong foundation, when the storm blows past, well, it's just going to take you along with it, isn't it?
That's right.
We do see that over and over again.
When the ground gets a little shaky, when the thing you wanted to do successfully isn't quite going successfully yet, or during this downturn or whatever, returning to those original things, going through those exercises again.
Yeah.
Why am I committing to keep going?
Yeah. And, and don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not holding myself up or holding you up as being perfect on this score. But when I think of where I've come from, weight and health wise, and where I've ended up being able to reasonably stabilize, I'm accepting of moving up and down with what some people would consider way too wide a weight range and a size range. But for me, compared to being, almost twice the size and weight and all the health implications that came with that, I find it almost unfathomable to maintain within what I consider a reasonable range. For the best part of my life, I've been obese and morbidly obese, and to be able to fairly comfortably stay within this healthy range for me. But I've got to have those strong foundations, and they weren't easy to get to, but they're important enough for me to hold on to. So yeah, it's nice to have some practical tips to help build those strong foundations. He sounds like a good chap to listen to. I will tune in.
I thought so. And kind of simplified.
Yeah.
ABC. There's only really 3 little pieces that I need, but they're all highly I think, impactful things to pay attention to. So I hope everyone can utilize this, especially, like I said, this time of year as people are setting goals and trying new things, to use this ABC approach.
Definitely. So until next time, I hope you have a very wonderful week.
Take good care, everybody.